Вітаю, колеги. 209.
Greeting, colleagues. This is 218th day of heroic resistance of Ukraine. I'm Natalia Starobrava. We start our series of briefings at the Mediacentru Ukraine. With us, we have Yurii Poita, the head of the Asia-Pacific section at the Center for Army Conversion and Disarmament Studies. Yurii, greetings. Good day. So we are seeing that since the 21st of September, when Russia has announced partial mobilization, the Russian nationals are fleeing to the neighboring countries. How many Russians have fled to Kazakhstan? Kazakhstan is one of the countries of the Eurasian Economic Union, meaning that most procedures for the acquisition of the permanent residence status or temporary residence status, opening the bank accounts, are much simpler compared to the European countries where the visa regime is on. So, quite expectedly, Kazakhstan became one of the countries where the Russian men have exited in mass, dodging mobilization. The Kazakhstan government, the Ministry of Interior, is saying that the number is 100,000 individuals who arrived from the Russian Federation, but at the same time they were saying that 65,000 people have left the territory of Russian Federation. So if we believe the numbers, then the Russian nationals are mostly considering Kazakhstan as a point of transit in order to travel onwards to other countries. It's hard to say how accurate that is, as we don't know whether 65,000 people have belong to the 100,000 that have arrived since the launch of the mobilization, maybe 65,000 that have left that may have arrived early with the beginning of the full-scale invasion. To make a rough estimate, we have 100,000 people, the new arrivals, since the 21st of September, and some of them, maybe a half, maybe a third of them, have left the territory of Kazakhstan. What are we observing? What kind of people are they? Women, men? We don't have any data officially from the government, but watching the video, the photographic footage of the border crossing, of the queues running up to the border crossing with the border of Kazakhstan. These are predominantly conscription-aged men who are trying to leave Russia because they've been handed in summons or they are trying to leave Russia. So because they've received the summons or will likely receive the summons to fight in the war against Ukraine. So this is predominantly male age 18 to 60, so conscription age. Sometimes they bring their families with them, but mostly it's the men. Because the Russian nationals are trying to flee Russia, some mobile conscription centers are opening up at the border crossing points. So such have sprung up at the border with Georgia and Finland. And are you seeing anything similar in Kazakhstan? Yes, there were some reports that there were conscription centers there, but we don't know any details of the way they operate, whether they check the documents of all the men or just the men heading from the border crossing point, as they have been recorded on the conscription list or been handed the summons, but we don't have any reliable confirmation yet. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan have banned their nationals from fighting the war in Ukraine. They will be sentenced from 5 to 9 years imprisonment. So why did the country make this step? And does it mean that Kazakhstan does not stand with Russia in the war against Ukraine? This policy has been consistent since 2014, when the nationals of these countries, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, entail criminal liability and is qualified as mercenaries. It depends on whose side the Kazakh nationals are fighting on. The same in the case of fighting in the ranks of the foreign region of Russia. The same liability entails for fighting on the territory of other countries. So we are seeing neutrality of Kazakhstan and the neighboring countries in the Ukraine-Russian war, meaning that Kazakhstan and others are not providing military assistance, are not providing military technical support, at least en masse, such as the complete weaponry and armaments, but equally they're not assisting the Ukrainian party. So I would say their position is a balanced one. But the countries are providing assistance to Russia in economic terms, in terms of logistics, in terms of dodging sanctions. Some countries are prepared to implement some projects to evade sanctions. So we would say it's neutrality prone into friendship with Russia. How do the people of Kazakhstan feel about Russians fleeing Russia towards Kazakhstan, dodging draft, and about the Ukrainian-Russian war? It is hard to say specifically, as we don't have the sociological surveys, but following the response of the social networks, the comments of the people that I'm talking to from Kazakhstan, among the experts, amongst the journalists, we're seeing a polarized, a divided view. Some Kazakhs, the ethnic Kazakhs and the nationals of Kazakhstan, disregarding their ethnicity, sympathize with the individuals fleeing Russia, calling them as much as refugees, giving them shelter, temporarily assisting them in landing jobs, providing humanitarian assistance to them. And they sympathize with the people, saying they'd better flee and not fight the war against Ukraine. And this will also help the Ukrainian people who are against the war. People who are against the war with Ukraine, but they're against mobilization. They don't want to be personally involved, but they are overall supportive of the policy of the Russian Federation. They're supportive of the current government. So they should not be treated in any ways as the refugees, but should be treated quite differently. But there are some people who are concerned that these people, these Russian nationals fleeing to Kazakhstan, may trigger economic troubles for the country because there is a currency leakage. They bring in Russian rubles, and this results in the leakage of the Kazakh currency. This places a burden on the social services, as there are times when many landlords have evicted their tenants because the price on the real estate lease has hiked because of the Russians arriving in the country, and many students had become stranded without a home. The third reason for concern is that these Russian nationals might take part in some events to support Russia, to support the so-called special operations and destabilize the internal policies. So the Kazakh society is divided. It is polarized. There are some people for Russians fleeing to Kazakhstan, and there are equally people against it. In your estimate, how has the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation in Ukraine changed the relationship between Russia and Kazakhstan? Officially, Kazakhstan stands neutral. It is not joining the war. It is stating that the parties have to seek understanding and peace, but they've never directly criticized the conduct of the Russian Federation. They never talk of the war crimes committed by the Russian Federation, the genocide committed by the Russian Federation. So they're very cautious as not to deteriorate their relations with Russia. We see Kazakhstan is not giving military assistance, military technical assistance to the Russian party, yet Kazakhstan is cooperating in economics, logistics, finance, military, within the security bloc, the joint military exercises that Kazakhstan is still involved in. So if they're not immediately involved in the hostilities, they haven't severed their relations with Russia. Because if we consider the political context made between the top leadership of the countries, we don't see the countries drifting apart. We don't see Kazakhstan trying to lessen the economic and any other ties with Russia. Some Kazakhstan experts, and I believe some of the Kazakhstan political circles are reconsidering their relations with Russia, perceiving it increasingly as a potential threat, even though Kazakhstan and Russia has amicable relations. But the goals pursued by Russia in Ukraine, the annihilation of the Ukrainian state, and annihilation of the Ukrainian nation, demonstrates that it will likely do the same in other countries within its geopolitical sphere of influence, and Kazakhstan is part of it. So, after settling the so-called Ukrainian question, the Russian Federation is likely to turn its gaze on Kazakhstan and try to interfere in the Kazakhstan interior and foreign policy, turning it into a puppet state. These are some fears, but are they prevalent at the top political level? That is still hard to say. They're still articulating and posturing a friendly stance, although not admitting or recognizing the actions of the Russian Federation or annexation of the occupied Ukrainian territories. Yurii, thank you for this conversation. We talked to Yurii Poita, the head of the Asia-Pacific Section at the Center of Army Convention and Disarmament Studies. And we'll be back at 13:30, and we'll talk to Fedor Venislavsky, the representative of the President of Ukraine,